Well, we're back with another fun conversation as part of our Make America Healthy Again theme that we're excited the whole country is electric with the atmosphere of change and possibility. And I thought it would be great to have Ashley Armstrong of the Strong Sistas in our show today to talk about what we can do. How you doing, Ashley?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on. I agree. There is just this general level of hope and
Yeah.
excitement that is spreading across Twitter. And honestly, Twitter is just like fun, entertaining. I love the positivity. It's like it just feels so different
Yeah.
than where we were from COVID. It's such a different transition and environment. And hey, truthfully, they're talking a lot of talk. So let's see what can
Right.
actually happen
Yeah.
in the government. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
are there too many barriers to actually get anything done,
Yeah.
or can we actually get stuff done?
Yeah, that's best to keep your expectations sub-zero with anything related to the government, and then fight like hell. And if you get anything, then you're really happy, because then you always win.
Absolutely.
So that's the best way to do it. And I, have kind of enjoyed a low profile on Twitter, kind of a new guy to Twitter just a couple years ago when I heard Elon was in. I said, okay, I'll try Twitter. I'll try it if it's not completely owned by insanity at the ownership level. But, you can see the ascendancy of podcasts, the ascendancy of X to be able to shape the narrative in a way that is more culturally important than politically, really. I mean,
Yes.
I mean, I don't know if you saw it or if you know about Ron Paul, but he's an old icon in the world of food freedom and health, and he's been fighting the fight for decades, paving the way for folks like Joel Salatin, who's a fan of him, and Thomas Massey, who's a student of his in Congress and all that. And we were able to put Ron Paul and interview right before the election. I said, "Would you help Elon? Because Elon doesn't have a lot of experience. You don't hear him cutting government. He's good at firing people in the private sector, but government, like you just mentioned, is a whole other thing." And he said, "Oh yeah, I'd be willing to help." We kind of facilitated this thing using X and a simple little podcast interview to catch Elon's attention. It was like matchmaking. Hey Ron, would you help Elon? Then you go to Elon, put an article, he catches it, and oh yeah, we'd love to have Ron, and it turned into this huge thing that went viral. So that's an example of like there is totally a whole new media landscape here. NBC, ABC, these are so dinosaurs now. They're just really dramatically losing their relevance.
I haven't tuned into one in a very, very long time, which is so great for my mental health. I've got a proposition for you.
Yeah.
What if you try to connect Elon with me? Because I have firsthand experience dealing with bureaucrats with food regulation, and I'd be happy to chat with him about where did we sign up? I'd love to know, where did I sign up to say the government knows best for my health and can regulate and should regulate the food that I consume?
Mm-hmm.
Where did I sign
Right.
that?
Right. Right. It's not even
Where
constitutional.
It's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
constitutional. Like, why are there bureaucrats in place? How do the bureaucrats know better than me what I can put in my body, what's safe and what's not safe?
Right. Right.
Tell me where that is put, how that's constitutional, and then I'll listen. If it's there, I'll listen. I'll listen.
You
But
need you need to work with DOGE and be Department of Government Efficiency for food matters and food freedom because they could use some
I
help.
would
Joel,
love that.
Saladin,
I
you
mean,
guys,
we
yeah.
have personal experience. Like, bureaucrats came here, they raided our freezers, they made us throw away $90,000 of raw dairy products. We couldn't give it to our animals. We
Yeah.
couldn't eat it ourselves.
Did you see it? Did you know they were coming, or what was the story with that?
Nope. Nope. Nope.
Just unannounced raid. Was it state or federal or everybody or
State.
state?
State.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Uh, that was right around the time of the avian influenza situation.
But to
But
be clear, even though it is state level, there's a lot of edicts from the federal level that influence the state at the state level. So it's kind of goes hand in hand, really. It's
yeah,
all
who knows who actually like initiated
yeah,
and it probably took them like 7 months to actually get the raid
yeah,
organized because of their pace. But that we that was very soon after we started our business. And if we didn't receive donations, we would have gone out of business.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
$90,000. There are the margins in food production are very slim.
yeah,
Distribution, all of this is a huge problem for smaller co-ops like
Yeah.
us, like starting from the ground up. And if we did not receive donations, we would not be in business today. And I think that that's kind of like the tune. And, you see what happened with Amos Miller out in
Yeah.
Pennsylvania, targeting people where they see like, oh, maybe this could go somewhere. We need to put this to an end now.
Yeah.
But all we're trying to do is reconnect consumers with farmers. A lot of our farmers don't want to market. They don't know how to market. They don't know how to distribute. That's a
Yeah.
challenge. I have really high standards for food production. So just learning how to like rebuild that connection and decentralize the food system, have more organized partnership of farmers. And why does big ag and bureaucrats, why do they need to come into this and tell us what we should be doing?
Mm-hmm. Because it's a mafia, and the design of the structure was put in place largely around World War II, and the mafia needs to take care. And look, obviously, you always have to put the caveat because there'll be somebody that'll listen to my show and say there are really well-meaning people. So you always put that little caveat for folks. But I'm sure there's well-meaning people. You can get well-meaning people to do anything. You can get well-meaning people to throw a grandma off the cliff if they think that's good for their health. I mean, they'll do anything when you get into that group thing. But that's what's going on here with, it's a World War II era system that was designed for a central command economy, which would be called basically in the classical definition of big government, big business merging together. That's corporate fascism. And that system was put in place to beat the fascists and everybody else. That was a problem at World War II. You had to be able to command and control and have frozen orange juice, and that was how you had to have your frozen little thing of orange juice, and everything was very processed and everything. And they never really got rid of it because it was very, war is good for profiteering, and it's nice to keep that system in place because you can consolidate power to a few beef producers, a few dairy producers, and the whole thing's an oligarchy, right?
Yep. And it's funny because you get it. You understand the structure and how it is actually, the system is so broken, but it is so profitable for these large companies. And that's what I mean in the beginning of this conversation when I said they're talking a lot of talk. Are these big companies going to allow for these big policy changes to occur that will literally take money out of their pockets? It's going to be an interesting terrain and thing to navigate.
Yeah. And then a lot of the dogfight is going to be in the media discourse, right? Because now that podcasts, it's like a boxing match. The podcast and X kind of world just took a big win against the old media, the New York Times and that stuff. But they're not done yet. And they're very well funded and they got huge support. They got all the institutions of universities and everything. So there's going to be an all-out battle on so many levels, right?
It's happening now.
Yeah.
Do you see how they are putting RFK there, how they are like quack, insane, like such bad messaging. And at the end of the day, if they understood that like what he is actually standing for, but they don't allow that, right? And so, what is big media going to portray over these next couple of months? And let's just pray and hope that he actually gets officially nominated for HHS. Let's pray that happens.
Yeah, let's pray for that. And let's also pray that the folks who are picked for FDA commissioner and all the other ones, NIH, underneath his division, are also not just cronies who are going to be pushing back against him every step of the way, because that may be a compromise that the corrupt controlled Senate will say, oh yeah, we'll give you a token win with Kennedy, but then we'll stack all the other positions. You've got to give us big pharma or big food cronies to just stop them and sabotage every step of the way. But again, with media and with transparency in government like Kennedy and Trump are promising, and Elon, there's an X factor here, literally. With X. So
yeah.
So what your voice provides is a couple of different interesting ways to go with your farming experience. I mean, originally, when I first reached out to interview, it was because of that Ray thing. I wanted to hear what that was like because, I remember I was at the Rogue Food Conference that they did recently, I think a year or two ago now, with at Polyface with Joel Salatin, and they had a fiery speech from Amos Miller, and he did a great job explaining what he was going through. And he had an awesome line. He said something like, "Ye shall not pass," or something. It was very Lord of the Rings level against the state intrusion, but they still persecute people like that. And recently I interviewed, you know, folks like Dr. Chris Kenobi, and I said, we've got to be able to make it clear, and we've got to be able to make it very resoundingly simple that you won Pennsylvania because you got a historic turnout in part from the Amish and a lot of other groups. And they've been persecuted so much, and they're not going to come out again 4 years for JD Vance or something like that if their freedoms are not protected with this huge mandate that they were a part of. So Pennsylvania is such an important part of winning any White House. And so if you want to do this again, you really have to deliver for folks like Amos Miller, you know?
Yeah.
How do you do that?
It's
What specific, do you have any particular laws or regulations that you would point people to that need to be repealed or introduced, or something that you think would help?
Yeah, so for context, if the audience doesn't know, my sister and I started a farm, a regenerative farm, back in 2021. First generation farmers, zero experience. It's like comical to look back on, but
Yeah.
I realized how important food sourcing is because the conventional food system is not serving us. It's not working. It is a centralized, controlled, big ag, profit-centric system where corners are cut every day, every second to maximize production and minimize costs at the expense of our health and farmers' health. So I never blame farmers, right? They are doing the best they can given this horrible system that we have. The horrible system is set up for Bayer and Monsanto, that conglomerate, to make serious amounts of money. And unfortunately, farmers get squeezed out so much profits. So many farmers are going out of business. They have poor mental health. They have to get off the farm jobs. Like it's almost so when I told someone, hey, I am finishing my PhD and I'm becoming a farmer, like they laughed at my face because of this perception that farming has in mainstream. Oh, it's not a good job. You don't make money. Yeah, in the sense you don't. So unfortunately, like that's going to weed out more and more farmers. There's going to be a huge land exchange in the next 5 to 10 years. 70% of the land is owned by 75 or older. And if we don't get young people interested in farming, that land is going to be sold to people like Bill Gates or large real estate developments. And we are going to become more reliant on this horrible centralized food system and food grown in labs. And the food that you eat every single day plays the biggest role in improving your health. And so preserving small scale regenerative farming is so vital for any sort of hope on the health of future generations, right? And unfortunately, there are so many barriers that make that type of system, that farming style, just almost impossible for most people.
Yeah.
Because when you are a farmer, you have to wear so many hats, right? You take care of livestock, you take care of the land, doing marketing, distribution, sales, quality control, like all of that is a lot. And so what my sister and I, and like what Amos Miller does as well, we're a partnership of farmers and we take care of the marketing. We ensure that customers are going to buy the products. We take care of, credit card transactions, dealing with all that tech stuff and distribution. Shipping is a whole ball game that I didn't even understand. And so then that way the farmers can focus on doing what they're really good at and get paid a fair wage. That's a big thing that I try to focus on. The conventional system, farmers are barely paid anything. So let's give them a fair wage so that they don't have to work off the farm and they can actually have time and resources to do a better job while on the farm. So I think the biggest thing is, like I said earlier, where did consumers sign something that says the government must regulate what they consume? These bureaucrats are put in place just to regulate food. When they came here to raid, because we sell raw dairy, when they came here to raid, um, they literally said, thank you for this. Without you, we wouldn't have a job. And so
Thank you for
bureaucrats are
letting
put
us destroy your product. Wow.
um, bureaucrats are put in place to regulate our food. And what are they using to base that regulation on, right? Like what value add are they giving? Whereas if we go back to how things were in the early 1900s, a very capitalistic society where farmers or farm cooperatives, there were quite a few farm co-ops at
Hmm.
that time. I love studying early 1900 agriculture, USDA, food guidelines, farming. They were doing a lot of things right before, World War II. And um, they had a partnership of farmers that would then sell to consumers, right? It was direct. There was no government intervention. And if the consumer didn't like the farm products, they would go elsewhere. If they
Hmm.
didn't feel good eating the farm products, they would go elsewhere because there are other options to choose from. And so, how did we get to that type of model to where we are today, where they regulate every part of it, and they have the most ridiculous standards that are very good for the big meat packers, the big dairy companies, processed food. They make sense for those items, but it doesn't make any sense for small scale. And it almost makes things so cost prohibitive. These regulations, they cost more. It costs more to get things done a certain way. It costs more to have more and more things inspected and with stamps of approval. These are all costs, right? The government has you pay for things at every step of the process.
Hmm.
And when you are a small scale farmer, the numbers just don't add up.
Yeah.
And so, of course, people are going to get discouraged.
Yeah. And they
So,
start with the fear. It has to start with fear
yeah,
because even conservatives and so-called libertarians and conservatives will say, and health progressives or something will say, well, we don't want raw milk because you could die, everybody could die, and it's just a mimetic hysteria that they've put into the people's minds for decades through propaganda. And obviously, there's always a little kernel of truth in any kind of hysteria. That's what makes it so effective. You can always point
yeah.
to one example here or there, but they don't ever point to the constant outbreaks of heavily regulated food that's always making people sick anyways. That's never really put into the narrative, but it's all about media. It's all about the media.
Yeah.
Our country has been ruled by oligarchic TV and newspaper media for
Yep.
decades, like I don't know, I mean, you could the way you want to put it, but it's been about as long as this system has been put in place. Like you talked about, 1910s was a different era than what we have now. And that media era really kind of cemented and controlled this kind of mental insanity that's they always use that word gaslighting, but they're the experts on gaslighting people into this constant state of this. It's like an artificial dark age. And if we could lift it, people would be like, "Are you kidding me? We spent 100 years doing all these insane things, keeping people away from really tasty food that's extremely rich in nutrient."
Well, like honestly, if someone doesn't do well with raw dairy, if they don't want to consume it, like you don't have to, right? Like there are very good pasteurized dairy options, but again, it goes back to like if it comes from a safe place that you trust, why can't a consumer purchase from a farmer that they trust?
Mhm.
Why does there have to be intervention in that? Why can't there be a direct path?
Mhm.
And why is it that if anyone were to walk into a confinement building where thousands, sometimes millions chickens are stuffed into buildings. There's antibiotics in the water. They are on a very strict vaccine schedule. The food that they're consuming is garbage. It smells bad like that. And then those chickens are butchered in a facility where their carcasses are dumped in bleach to clean off all of the nastiness on those chickens. We then consume the bleach.
Mhm.
Other countries don't consume American chicken because of the bleach that's in our
Mhm.
chicken. But that model is safe and totally fine because the government regulations say so, because it's profitable for the big food companies.
Mhm.
And so the regulation standards, they gotta change. They
Yeah.
gotta change. And uh do they even need to be there? That's the biggest question.
No, they
Should
don't.
there be a there should be a direct line between a consumer and a farmer, or a consumer and
Yeah.
a farm partnership.
Yeah.
Similar, Amos Miller, he's got a PMA, a private membership agreement, where customers sign up understanding that this is a private agreement
Hmm.
between the farm partnership, because Amos Miller is not the only farmer. He has a bunch of farmers supplying for him. Similar thing with us. Um, there should be able to be a direct line there.
Yeah. I think, and that's something I asked Ron Paul when he was on the show. I said, "Do you agree?" And this was kind of me being I like to put people from disparate worlds that I see connections. And I said, "Do you agree with the late great Dr. Ray Peat when he said that, because Ray was someone on the left, Ron's on the right, libertarian, but there's so much synergy when you go on those paths, you start coming onto the same thing. Would you agree with Dr. Ray Peat that the food system, in some sense, the way in which they've subsidized seed oils and bleach and lecithins and all these terrible things are actually not a bug of the system, but a feature that it's basically about using it as a kind of weapon to dumb and dull down the population from being able to rise up against their oligarchic masters?" And he said, "Yes, I think so." Actually, he said he's an OBGYN doctor in his past, and he said, "I've learned a lot of different things over the years that has really had me question a lot of the medical training that I grew up in." And so I think that may be what we're dealing with, really, at some level, maybe not at the middle level. Most people who are just going along with following orders, that's just the nature of human beings at a certain percentage of people's tendencies. But there's also this kind of design where they don't want that to change, because when people stop hating their neighbor and they can actually have a strong thyroid. And I always say I've been trying to do this new thing, because it's Breitbart used to say, politics is downstream from culture, but I think politics is downstream from thyroid. If your thyroid's impaired and the masses have this low energy state, that learned helplessness becomes a status quo of how we process and relate to one another, where we're snapping at each other or at each other's throats for the most trivial things, right?
I love that. Okay, so I think it's important for people to understand early 1900s, our dietary fatty acids were completely different than what they are today. We were much more saturated. So we consumed animal fats, butter, dairy fats, tallow,
Mm.
lard. The animal products that they were consuming, the animals weren't eating a bunch of soy, vegetable oil, canola. These things didn't really exist, right? So everyone's dietary fat consumption was much more saturated. And the types of fat that you consume in your diet directly impacts the types of fat inside of you. It is
Mm.
very clear. Now there is data showing, fast forward to today, with this huge change in the types of dietary fat that we're consuming. We went from animal fats to heart healthy vegetable and seed oils, in addition to changing the fatty acid composition of chicken and pork that we're consuming. And we're substituting real dairy with soy milk and all this other stuff. We've seen a huge change in our dietary fatty acid composition, much higher in PUFA, polyunsaturated fatty acids, lower in saturated. And this is changing the human species. We are becoming
Right.
a new breed of human. And this
Yeah.
is well documented. Our fatty acid
Yeah.
composition inside of us has changed.
Yeah.
And this has severe consequences on our metabolic rate. Polyunsaturated fatty acids are well documented to lower our metabolic rate. Just go look at any hibernation or torpor literature,
Mhm.
and you will see squirrels, bears, all these animals that go into hibernation, they increase their PUFA consumption before going into hibernation so that their metabolic rate can be down regulated so that they can survive not eating for several months, right?
Right.
So humans are our metabolic rates are being down regulated due to the huge change in our diets. And this is also being documented with a decline in our body temperature. So a body temperature measurement is a clear, like you can measure your body temperature and gain insight of your metabolic health. And because that
Mhm.
is when you generate ATP, one of the
Mhm.
byproducts is heat. And so the more energy that you produce, the better metabolic rate, better
Mhm.
thyroid health you have, the
Mhm.
more heat you produce, and thus your higher body temperature. Our
Mhm.
body temperature is declining. We're seeing chronic disease rates rising, rising cancer rates, obesity, and our life expectancy is going down.
And
Like
quality of life.
quality of life. And
Yeah.
so who knows if there was someone that was ill-intentioned with this in the beginning. Maybe it was just like, hey, this is a cool opportunity, let's build
Mhm.
it. But at what point are we going to wake up and say, hello,
Yeah.
it is not working.
Yeah.
It's not working. And when you are in a low metabolic state, you have less systemic energy production. So this is happening all over the US. Your
Chronic
brain
fatigue. Yeah.
requires so much glucose,
Yeah.
requires so much energy to run
Yeah.
properly. So when you are in a low metabolic, low thyroid state, and guys, your thyroid lab work is not going to tell you that, because conventional standard TSH measurements are not going to tell you that you have a fine thyroid. Subclinical hypothyroidism is like pervasive, right? We
Mhm.
have an epidemic of that all over. And when you are in a low energy state, your brain doesn't function as well. You can't think clearly. You, like you said, you are in the state of learned helplessness, and so you don't question the status quo.
Mhm.
You don't treat people well. You see this all the time. And I tweeted about this the other day. I'm having fun with Twitter. I'm kind of new to it, and I
Yeah.
feel like I'm going back to Facebook status in high
Yeah.
school and just like updating my status.
Yeah.
I tweeted the other day, how you treat others
Yeah.
in real life and on social media is a direct reflection of your metabolic health. If you
Right.
are mean, rude, always looking for what's wrong, snappy, you're in a low energy state. I'm sorry.
But the question is, and that's why, Trump said when he said he was going to do the Department of Government Efficiency with Elon and Vivek, he said something that I like. It's a word that I've liked to use for this issue. He said, I want a Manhattan Project level group, right? And I was like, we need a Manhattan Project for understanding what's going on in our society and why so much of this hatred between left and right and everybody else is all manufactured and downstream from thyroid. It's all
Yeah.
flowing from this same bottleneck that's spewing out all of these dysfunctional outcomes that we're chasing the downstream effects. Oh, take medication for it. Oh, practice different disciplines to forgive. All those are great. But I love there's a meme where there's a picture of this guy saying, Jesus, you've given me all these hard things. I can't understand how I can bear this anymore. And he says, have you checked your thyroid? And it's like we can attribute all of these things to these, and which all are part of the factors. But to say, oh my goodness, it's this, it's that, it's this, I can't ever keep up. It's just so much. That's not true. This is a psyop. It's not real. You were meant to live an abundant life. You were not meant to accept this sense that the older you get, the grumpier you become. That's not the way it's supposed to be. You're actually supposed to become more childlike and joyful the more you understand how to take care of yourself. And nobody's talking about it. And that's, I think, the biggest downfall and potential pitfall of this opportunity with this new administration and everything is misinformation about what the alternative to the status quo is. That's where it gets really tricky.
No one's talking about metabolic health. And so, truthfully, I've been in this for a little while. And when you say the word thyroid health, no one cares. No
Yeah.
one tunes in because they've been told by their doctor that their thyroid's fine. Their
Yeah.
TSH is totally fine.
Yeah.
I find that people tune in when you start to bring up metabolism
Yeah.
because that's more relatable to them. Like they can, for some reason, understand it. But many people don't understand thyroid health and metabolism. They're intricate because
Yeah.
your thyroid is the master metabolic regulator. Your thyroid is a single gland. People think it's just your gland. No, no, no. There's a thyroid system and there's four parts. Your thyroid, which produces T4 and a little bit of T3. T4 is inactive thyroid hormone. So the thyroid just produces the hormone. Now the body's got to go do something with it. What matters is that we get active thyroid hormone T3 into the mitochondria. No one's doing that. No one's doing that.
Mhm.
Getting active thyroid hormone T3 into the mitochondria is the spark plug to initiate your metabolism.
Right.
And we are seeing metabolic breaks happening all over the body to not allow the T3 active thyroid hormone to get into the metabolism.
Mhm.
So your thyroid has to produce T4 inactive thyroid hormone. It's got to travel around the body, largely in the liver and in your gut. You see T4 to T3 conversion. So we want T4 to go into T3. T3 is active thyroid hormone. And then T3 needs to be transported to every cell in your body to go in the mitochondria and initiate
Mhm.
optimal energy production. It is
Mhm.
the T3 that is required to turn enzymatic activity on so that the electron transport chain can run efficiently and we can generate ATP. So we're just checking our thyroid gland status, but we need intracellular active thyroid hormone T3 to actually have good thyroid health and metabolic health. And so it's a thyroid system, and our Western medicine isn't assessing it. And again, if you go back to how they used to do things, Dr. Broda Barnes, early 1900s, how they would assess health is body temperature, pulse, symptom assessment, and cholesterol measurements. That gave them a picture of how the body was functioning systemically, because metabolic health, thyroid health is the centerpiece of your health. If you do not fix that, you are just putting Band-Aids.
Yeah.
When you fix your energy production, it's like the rising tide lifts all boats, right? If you fix energy production, all these symptoms are going to start to go away, because then your body has more energy to run functions properly. Of course, if your body doesn't have enough energy, things are going to be down-regulated.
Right.
If you aren't producing enough energy, your body temperature is going to go down. If you have a lower body temperature, enzymatic reactions slow down. This is very well established in like chemistry, right? 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit is like the optimal temperature for certain enzymatic reactions to happen in the body. No one is at 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Everyone's down-regulated, and that's going to lead to a loss of function.
How long does it take to get back to that 98.6 degrees in your research? Years?
Honestly,
years,
so
6 months? What for average people? Do you know anything?
it really depends on how long someone has been in this state. However, I really view that when you see health this way, it becomes simple, because you don't view yourself as, I have a disease, I'm broken, I'm damaged. It's just, I'm just a little bit out of tune. And honestly, removing the metabolic brakes. So I think it's a two-step process. First, give the body the tools it needs. You need animal protein for B vitamins. B vitamins are vital for the electron transport chain. They're trying to take away our meat. They're trying, you need adequate carbohydrates to convert T4 into T3 and to get T3 into the cells. You need sufficient calories for your needs. You need electrons to move through the electron transport chain. And you need to remove the metabolic brakes. So that's going to be endocrine disruptors with estrogenic chemicals that are all over the environment, from toxic agrochemicals like glyphosate. You need to get rid of the PUFAs, polyunsaturated fatty acids, in your diet where you can, right? So that would be vegetable oils, seed oils, aggressively eating nuts and seeds, soy milk, things like that.
Chicken fat, I think, is one of the number one producers or consuming points for linoleic acid. And
that's what Tucker Goodrich reports.
Yeah.
If you can't afford well-fed chicken and pork, either don't eat it and prioritize beef, or just eat the leaner cuts where you're not consuming the fats on the chicken and pork. So reducing your PUFA consumption and prioritizing more dairy fats and beef fats and well-fed chicken and pork, remaining active to whatever form of exercise that you prefer. Those are like very simple things that one can do that would really move the needle forward, and not fasting all the time. Like people are, bragging about, oh my God, I've been so busy all day, I'm running around, and then they go and binge the rest of the night. That's not going to support your thyroid system.
We have a lot of Ray Peat fans that listen to the show, so I want to leave it. I want to leave it here so we can kind of think of this and maybe do another show. But a lot of folks say, hey, how can I understand all of the ideas of Ray? Because Ray did not give a little simple diet formula like the South Beach diet or the grapefruit diet. It wasn't some gimmick. He was just talking about principles, and then everybody else has to piece together some kind of insight that might work for them. But with that comes this environment where there's a lot of confusing narratives as to what is something that Ray would actually recommend. For example, Ray has said in some interviews, if you want to lose weight and get in shape and be healthy metabolically, sometimes you have to just stop eating, take a break, and then have a very low calorie for a little while. Some people say you got to do super low fat. Some people say, Brad Marshall researches with proteins and branched chain amino acids. So there's all these, because there's no good research at the institutional level, everybody's just trying to work through this as best as they can with limited resources. What do you think folks who want to take care of their health with this kind of bioenergetic paradigm and Ray stuff, do you do low fat? Do you do middle of whatever you want, low carb? Everybody has all these debates. What do you think?
Okay, so I think it's important to remember one of Ray's most quoted quotes is the main thing is to keep the metabolic rate up, and there are many ways to do it,
Mm-hmm.
right? So he never wrote out a specific dietary guideline. However, from my experience working with people in our course and working with others, is I think that keeping dietary fats on the more moderate side is important because most people are
What's
in
moderate
this
to
like
you for people who want to write down notes? For people who, and then you could give them a website
um
or wherever to go to learn more.
zero point 0.8 to 1.2 grams of fat per kilogram body weight.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Of your
think
desired
that,
body weight or where you're at?
oh, that's
Is
a
it
good
lean body
question.
mass or what?
Um, I think ideal, if someone has a lot of weight to lose,
Mm,
then ideal could work. But if you're like in a normal weight
mm,
range, zero point 0.8 to 1.2 grams of
okay.
fat per kilogram body weight. However, I do think that there's fluctuation there once you're in a good metabolic state.
Mm-hmm.
From my experience, for someone that is metabolically unwell, they're in this swampland where they are severely insulin resistant, right?
Mm-hmm.
And going low fat for a period of time can help them restore proper glucose metabolism. If you look back to what our ancestors were eating in like the 1900s, late 1800s,
Mm-hmm.
they were eating a moderate fat approach. They weren't
Mm-hmm.
going super high fat, but they were kind of more in like, maybe 25 to 30% dietary fat in their calories,
Mm-hmm.
but they were metabolically well. They weren't stuffed with PUFAs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that when someone reaches where they want to be, when they improve their glucose utilization,
Mm-hmm.
I think that they can go higher fat, especially if they have a lot of muscle mass, because muscle mass uses a lot of fat. Like sitting down here is using fat for fuel, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, my glucose right now is using a lot of, or sorry, my brain is using a lot of glucose right now. So I think it depends on where you're at in your life.
Yeah.
If you are needing to lose a lot of weight, I do think that lowering your dietary fat, improving your glucose utilization, like literally the definition of having a good metabolism is being able to oxidize glucose properly, pull carbohydrates, the electrons from the carbs that you're consuming all the
Mm-hmm.
way through to the end electron acceptor, oxygen, and
Mm-hmm.
then produce the maximal amount of ATP and CO2, right?
Mm-hmm.
So restoring that proper electron flow is very important.
Right.
And for those that are not in a good metabolic state, keeping dietary fat low, once you're able to, relearn, I think you can be more moderate and
Mm-hmm.
fitting your preferences, what you have access to, what is sustainable for you. If
Mm-hmm.
you feel like something is extreme, you can't do it, then that's not the right way. It shouldn't be hard.
Right.
I think that there's going to be a period of time where it can be harder than what you're doing now as you learn new habits and learn like a new way, but it shouldn't feel like you're like this all day, right? And
Yeah.
you want to go binge, and that's a sign that you are in a very low energy state and your body
Mm-hmm.
is asking for a lot of food. So I do think that short-term fat loss phases, like 6 to 10 week fat loss phases, I do think that those are helpful for people where you
Mm-hmm.
do cut calories. Ray has talked about this on a number of interviews. He has said, oh, just use skim milk. So if you go from whole milk to skim milk, you cut out a ton of fat calories from your day.
Mm-hmm.
And so doing a short-term fat loss phase and then getting back to your maintenance calories or pushing your maintenance calories as high as possible as soon as you can after that fat loss phase. We don't want to be chronically under eating because that is just a clear way to a lower metabolic rate.
Well, this has been a fantastic conversation, and I think there's a lot of opportunity for further conversations in the future. But tell us where we can look at your farm products or anything you want to share, as well as I know you guys do your own podcast and how people can best find that.
All right, so if you want to learn more about metabolic health, that's like my sister and I's account, Strong Sistas. So we're on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Strong Sistas. You can find us at www.armstrongsisters.com. And then we have a podcast called Rooted in Resilience. So that's kind of if you want to learn more about pro-metabolic, Ray Peat's work, metabolic principles. And then if you want access to like farm fresh, clean food products, low PUFA food products, that's our passion project, supporting regenerative agricultural's decentralizing food system. That is www.nourishcooperative.com and Angel Acres Farm. So if you just search in Google Angel Acres Farm, you'll get some low PUFA eggs. So yeah, we're working on both sides.
Does that ship anywhere in the country?
Yep, we are just, diving in, shipping to all 50 states and trying to improve our shipping and distribution efficiencies over time. That's what we're only like a year in. So definitely learning a lot, but over time we hope to lower costs when you're starting so small, costs are high. And then as you scale up and add more small farmers, we will never cut corners in the farming production, but we will improve our distribution costs.
Well, very good. Thanks for coming on. And like I said, there's a lot of change opportunity that's afoot right now. And even if the political stuff all fails, the narrative, there's so much, that classic word they use in politics, the Overton window of what's allowed to be thought about and what's normal, right? It's all mimetic. It's shifting so fast that it's inevitable that if we don't blow up the country or the world with World War III or something like catastrophic, that we're going to win. We're winning, and it's not, even if it takes, again, 3 more administrations to finally tell the truth is unleashed. And St. Augustine said, you don't have to defend the truth, let it loose, and it will defend itself like a lion, so that's just what's going to happen. So
great.
That's exciting.
I love it. I agree. The consumers are waking up, and that's what we need to happen.
Very good. All right. Thanks for your time. And we'll continue to look at the Strong Sistas and what they're doing on the information side and Nourish Cooperative, where you can get farm fresh foods. I'm David Gornoski.
Thanks so much, David.
Thanks for having us on your podcast list today. You can email me hello@aneighborschoice.com. Godspeed.